Hey guys, picture this. You're standing in a cold stone hall. Your breath is showing in the air. At the end of the room, the king is sitting on a big chair made of wood and gold, staring straight at you. All the rich people around him are watching, whispering, and waiting for you to screw up. You're stuck in a tight clown suit covered in bells. It's hot and itchy, and the bells jingle every time you move. Your shoes hurt, your hat is heavy, and you smell bad because the outfit hasn't been washed in weeks. Now it's time to perform. You start juggling balls, trying to make the king laugh, while your stomach growls because you haven't eaten. If you say the wrong joke, like making fun of the queen or the fat bishop, the whole hall goes quiet. Then guards grab you, drag you outside, and the same people who laughed at you throw rotten food in your face until you stink. Being a jester wasn't just about being funny. It was about staying alive in front of the king. One bad joke could end your job, or even your life. So, if you want to know more about what it was really like to be a jester, hit that like button and subscribe. And write in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. So let's step into the world of a medieval jester and discover exactly why you wouldn't last a single week in those jingling shoes. Your day starts before dawn when the castle is still dark and freezing cold. There's no alarm clock, but you don't need one because the roosters start screaming at a volume that could wake someone 3 villages over. You're sleeping in a corner of the great hall, or maybe a tiny room you share with 2 other servants, both fully grown adults who snore like broken engines. The mattress beneath you is a sack stuffed with straw that's gone flat and lumpy. Every time you roll over, bits of straw poke through the fabric and jab you in the ribs. You wake up with red marks all over your side like you've been lying on a cheese grater. The blanket is scratchy wool that smells faintly of the sheep it came from, and it's not quite big enough to cover your feet and your shoulders at the same time. You spend half the night curling into a ball trying to stay warm. When you finally drag yourself up, your back aches like you've been carrying furniture up flights of stairs. The stone floor is so cold it feels like stepping onto a frozen lake. You don't have the luxury of slippers, so your bare feet go numb within seconds. You pull on your jester outfit, which is a patchwork nightmare of bright colours that looked ridiculous when it was new, and now looks even worse after months of wear. The fabric is stiff in places where you've spilled food or drink, and soft in others where it's wearing thin. The bells sewn onto every possible surface jingle with the slightest movement. Forget about sneaking anywhere or having a quiet moment. Every step you take announces your presence like a one-man percussion section. Your first task is to be amusing at breakfast, which means you need to be funny before you've even had anything to eat yourself. The lord and his household are gathered in the great hall, which is marginally warmer than the rest of the castle thanks to a fire that's been burning all night. The smell hits you immediately. It's a thick mix of smoke, damp stone and bodies that haven't seen a proper bath in weeks. The rushes on the floor haven't been changed in a month, and they're a festering carpet of dropped meat, spilled drink and crumbs that have been ground into a paste. Walking across them is like wading through a swamp. Your feet sink slightly with each step, and you try not to think about what's squishing between your toes. The lord is already in a foul mood because his breakfast isn't ready yet, and you're expected to lighten the atmosphere. You launch into a routine you've done 100 times, juggling wooden balls while making exaggerated faces. The balls are worn smooth from years of use, but one of them has a crack that pinches your finger every time you catch it. You ignore the pain and keep going, adding in a few tumbles and pratfalls. The floor is hard stone covered by those disgusting rushes, so every time you throw yourself down for a laugh, you land on something uneven. Maybe it's a bone from last night's dinner. Maybe it's a lump of hardened who knows what. Either way, you're going to have a bruise the size of an apple on your hip by the end of the day. After breakfast, assuming you manage to scrape together a few bites of leftover bread and cheese, you're expected to follow the Lord around and be entertaining on demand. He might be meeting with visiting nobles, inspecting the grounds, or just sitting around complaining about his neighbours. Your job is to provide a constant stream of jokes, songs and physical comedy. If the Lord is bored, you'd better do a backflip. If he's angry, you'd better make him laugh before he decides to take it out on someone. The pressure is relentless. It's like being in a meeting that never ends, except instead of pretending to pay attention, you have to actively perform while everyone watches and judges. The problem is that medieval humour is a minefield. What's funny one day might get you in trouble the next. You make a joke about the Lord's neighbour, and everyone roars with laughter. The next day, that neighbour is visiting, and suddenly the same joke could get you thrown out or worse. You have to read the room constantly, watching faces and body language, trying to gauge whether your next quip will land or sink like a stone. It's exhausting. Your brain is working overtime while your body is doing cartwheels, and your outfit is jingling like a mobile wind chime. By midday, you're already tired, but there's no break. The castle is a hive of activity. Servants are rushing around with trays and baskets. Hounds are wandering through the hall, sniffing for scraps and occasionally fighting over a bone. The noise level is incredible. People are shouting, dogs are barking. Something is always clattering or banging in the background. You're trying to perform a delicate bit of wordplay, and a hound decides that's the perfect moment to start howling, because another dog stole its spot by the fire. Everyone laughs at the dog and ignores you. You have to start over, louder this time, competing with the chaos. Then there's the food situation. As a jester, you're not quite a servant, but you're not part of the noble household either. You exist in this weird in-between space where you eat whatever's left after everyone else has had their fill. Sometimes that means a decent meal. More often, it means gnawing on a hunk of bread that's gone stale and a piece of cheese that's starting to turn. The butter has a rancid edge that coats your mouth with a greasy film that won't go away, no matter how much weak beer you wash it down with. The meat, when you get any, is gristly and tough, the kind that requires serious jaw work and still ends up stuck between your teeth for the rest of the day. Hunger is a constant companion. You're burning energy all day with your performances, but you're not getting enough fuel to keep up. Your stomach growls loud enough that sometimes people hear it during a quiet moment, and then you have to make a joke about it to cover your embarrassment. You laugh and pat your belly and say something about your stomach, thinking your throat's been cut, and everyone chuckles, but inside you're genuinely, painfully hungry. By evening, you're lightheaded and shaky, but you still have to perform through dinner, which is the biggest meal of the day and the one where the Lord expects the most entertainment. Dinner is when things get truly unpredictable. The Lord and his guests are eating and drinking heavily. The smell of roasted meat fills the hall, rich and fatty, making your mouth water and your stomach clench. You watch platters of food go by, piled high with roast fowl, pies, baked fish, and dishes you can't even name. The nobles tear into the food with their hands, grease running down their fingers, wiping them on the tablecloth or their clothes. They toss bones over their shoulders for the dogs. They belch loudly and laugh about it. Meanwhile, you're dancing and singing and doing impressions, and all you can think about is how good that roast smells, and how you won't get any until everyone else is finished. The drink flows freely, which means the crowd gets rowdier as the night goes on. Someone always decides it's hilarious to throw food at you. A chunk of bread comes flying at your head. You catch it and take a bite, turning it into part of the act, and everyone applauds. But inside, you're annoyed because that bread smacked you in the ear, and now there's a greasy spot on the side of your face. Later, someone throws a piece of meat. You're not fast enough, and it hits you in the chest, leaving a dark stain on your already dubious outfit. The bells jingle with the impact. Everyone laughs. You laugh too, because that's your job, but you're mentally adding another item to the list of indignities you've suffered today. The castle itself is a nightmare of discomfort. Forget any notion of heating or insulation. The stone walls are thick, which is great for defense but terrible for warmth. They radiate cold like they're made of frozen meat. Even in the middle of summer, the interior of the castle is cool and damp. In winter, it's absolutely brutal. The fire in the Great Hall helps, but only if you're standing right next to it. The heat doesn't spread. You can be warm on one side and freezing on the other, slowly rotating like a rotisserie chicken to try and thaw out evenly. Drafts are everywhere. The windows are narrow slits designed for archers, and they don't have glass, just wooden shutters that don't quite fit. Cold air sneaks in through every gap. Tapestries hang on the walls, partly for decoration but mostly to try and block some of the chill. They don't work. The wind finds its way around them, and you feel a constant cold breeze on the back of your neck no matter where you stand. You spend your days shivering, your muscles tense, your teeth occasionally chattering until you clench your jaw to stop it. The dampness is worse than the cold. The stone walls sweat with moisture. Touch a wall, and your hand comes away wet. Everything feels clammy. Your clothes never quite dry out. The air has a musty, mouldy smell that gets into your lungs and stays there. You wake up in the morning with a tight feeling in your chest, coughing until you clear out whatever settled there overnight. Damp breeds illness, and everyone in the castle is constantly fighting off something. Coughs echo through the halls. People sniff and sneeze and hawk loudly, spitting into the rushes. You try to avoid the sick ones, but when you're required to perform in close quarters, there's no escaping it. Your outfit is a special kind of torture. The bright, mismatched colours are meant to be eye-catching and ridiculous, which they certainly are. The tunic is tight around the chest and arms, restricting your movement just enough to be annoying. The sleeves are long and floppy, which looks silly but also means they're constantly getting in the way. You're juggling, and a sleeve droops into your line of sight. You're tumbling, and you nearly trip on the excess fabric. The trousers are just as bad, baggy in some places and tight in others, with more bells sewn along the seams. The hat is the final insult, a floppy, three-pointed monstrosity with bells on each tip. It doesn't stay on properly. You're constantly adjusting it, pushing it back when it slides forward over your eyes, catching it when it falls off during a cartwheel. The bells are your eternal torment. There are dozens of them, stitched onto every part of your costume. They jingle when you walk. They jingle when you breathe too heavily. They jingle when you scratch an itch. There's no such thing as a quiet moment. You can't sneak up on anyone. You can't have a private conversation without announcing your presence from 3 rooms away. You lie down to sleep, and the bells on your hat jingle softly as you shift positions. You wake up multiple times a night because you rolled over and the noise startled you. It's like trying to sleep while wearing a bag full of loose coins. The costume doesn't get washed often because washing is a major production. Water has to be hauled from the well, heated over a fire, and then you have to scrub the fabric by hand with harsh soap that leaves your skin red and raw. It takes forever, and the outfit takes days to dry in the damp castle air. So you wear it for weeks at a time, and it gets progressively more disgusting. Sweat soaks into the fabric and never quite comes out. Stains accumulate. The armpits develop a stiffness and a distinct pong that you can smell when you lift your arms. The whole outfit starts to carry a ripe, musty funk that blends with your own body odour into a signature scent that announces you even before the bells do. Personal hygiene is a distant dream. Bathing is rare and complicated. There's no running water, no shower you can hop into at the end of a long day. If you want to wash, you need access to a tub, which means either hauling water yourself or convincing someone to do it for you. The water is cold unless you heat it, which requires a fire and a pot and time you don't have. Most days, you make do with splashing cold water on your face from a basin. The shock of it wakes you up, but it doesn't make you feel clean. You scrub at your face with a rag that's probably not much cleaner than your skin. Your hands are grimy, your nails outlined with dirt that never quite comes out. You smell like everyone else in the castle, a rich blend of stale perspiration, unwashed clothes, and the general mustiness of medieval life. Your hair is another source of frustration. If it's long, it tangles into knots that are painful to comb out. If it's short, it sticks up at odd angles and gets greasy within a day. There's no shampoo, just harsh soap if you're lucky, or nothing at all if you're not. Your scalp itches constantly. You scratch at it absent-mindedly, your nails scraping across your scalp, and you tell yourself it's just dry skin. But sometimes you catch something under your nail, a tiny moving speck, and you realize the itching has a source. Lice are a fact of life. Everyone has them. The nobles, the servants, the lord himself. They spread from person to person, from hats, from bedding. You can try to pick them out, but it's a losing battle. They're always there, a constant low-level annoyance that you learn to live with. Fleas are even worse. They infest the rushes, the bedding, the clothes. They live on the dogs and cats that roam the castle, and they're not picky about jumping to a human host. You feel the bites as tiny pinpricks, usually around your ankles and lower legs, where the fleas jump up from the floor. By the end of the day, your legs are dotted with red welts that itch like mad. You scratch at them until they're raw, which only makes them worse. At night, lying in your straw mattress, you feel the occasional tickle of something crawling on your skin. You slap at it, and sometimes you get it, and sometimes it hops away to bite you somewhere else. Sleep is fitful, interrupted by itching and scratching, and the sound of your roommates doing the same. The toilet situation is medieval, in the worst sense of the word. There's no indoor plumbing, no flush toilets. If you're lucky, there's a latrine, which is basically a wooden seat over a pit or a chute that drops straight down the outside of the castle wall. You sit on the cold, splintery wood and do your business, while cold air rushes up from below. It's freezing on your backside, and the smell is eye-watering. The pit below is a festering mass that never gets fully cleaned out, just occasionally shoveled away when it gets too full. Flies buzz around in the warmer months, and the stench carries on the breeze, wafting into windows and making everyone gag. At night, or when you can't make it to the latrine, there are chamber pots. You do what you need to do in a pot, and then you have to carry it outside to empty it. The smell is strong and unpleasant, sloshing around as you walk. You try not to spill it on yourself, but sometimes the pot is too full, or you trip on the uneven floor, and a bit sloshes over the rim. Now you're walking around with a damp spot on your shoe and a stench that follows you. You empty the pot into a designated area outside, usually a ditch or a midden heap, and rinse it out with a bucket of water. The pot never gets truly clean. There's always a lingering smell, a faint reminder of its purpose, sitting in the corner of the room where you sleep. The social dynamics of the castle are a constant tightrope walk. As a jester, you're neither noble nor servant, which means you don't quite fit anywhere. The nobles tolerate you because you're entertaining, but they don't respect you. You're a curiosity, a pet, a distraction. They'll laugh at your jokes 1 minute and ignore you completely the next. You're expected to be available whenever they want amusement, but the moment they're done with you, you're dismissed like a piece of furniture. There's no job security. If you stop being funny, or if you offend the wrong person, you're out. No notice, no severance, just a boot out the door and good luck finding another position. The servants view you with suspicion. You don't do the same kind of work they do, hauling water and scrubbing floors and serving meals, but you're not above them either. Some of them resent you because they think you have it easy, making jokes while they break their backs. Others pity you because they know you're just as trapped as they are, dependent on the Lord's whim for your livelihood. You try to stay on good terms with everyone because you never know when you'll need a favour. A servant who likes you might slip you an extra piece of bread, or warn you when the Lord is in a foul mood. A servant who dislikes you might accidentally trip you during a performance, or spread rumours that make your life harder. Then there are the other entertainers and hangers-on, musicians, storytellers, acrobats, anyone else who's trying to make a living by amusing the nobility. You're all competing for the same limited pool of attention and resources. A talented musician shows up, and suddenly the Lord is more interested in songs than jokes. You have to up your game, come up with new material, do something more daring to win back his favour. It's exhausting. There's no collaboration, no teamwork. Everyone is out for themselves, trying to secure their position and their next meal. The physical toll of the job is relentless. You're expected to be acrobatic and energetic, which means your body is constantly under strain. Tumbling, cartwheeling, pratfalls, exaggerated gestures, all of it adds up. Your knees ache from landing hard on stone floors. Your wrists are sore from catching yourself when you fall. Your shoulders protest from juggling and carrying props. You develop a persistent twinge in your lower back that never quite goes away, a dull throb that flares into sharp pain when you twist the wrong way. Your feet are a disaster. Those thin cloth shoes offer no cushioning, and you're on your feet all day. The soles of your feet develop calluses that crack and sting. You get blisters that pop, and then form new layers of tough skin. Sometimes a blister forms under a callus, and you have this painful lump that makes every step agony. You try to adjust your gait to avoid putting pressure on it, which just makes other parts of your feet hurt instead. At night, you peel off your shoes and the smell that wafts up is eye-watering. Your feet are swollen and red, and touching them sends sharp jolts of pain up your legs. Sleep is never enough. You're up before dawn and performing until late at night. By the time you collapse onto your straw mattress, you're so tired you could sleep on a bed of nails. But the mattress is lumpy, the blanket is inadequate, and the cold seeps into your bones. You drift into a restless sleep, waking frequently because you're uncomfortable or itchy, or your roommate is snoring like a congested bear. When the roosters start screaming at dawn, you feel like you've barely closed your eyes. You drag yourself up, every muscle protesting, and start the whole exhausting cycle again. The lack of privacy is maddening. You're never alone. You sleep in a shared space. You work in the great hall surrounded by people. Even when you sneak away for a few minutes, someone inevitably finds you and asks you to do something. There's no room where you can close the door and just be by yourself. You can't take a nap without someone waking you. You can't sit quietly and think without someone demanding a joke. The constant presence of others wears you down. You start to crave solitude like a starving person craves food, but it's a luxury you simply don't have. The noise is relentless. The great hall is always loud. Conversations, arguments, laughter, the clatter of dishes, the scrape of benches on stone, dogs barking, roosters crowing, the crackle of the fire. Even at night, it's not truly quiet. People snore. The wind howls through the cracks. Mice scurry in the walls, their tiny claws scratching on wood and stone. Somewhere in the castle, someone is always moving, always doing something. Your ears never get a rest. You long for silence, for a moment of peace, but it never comes. The weather compounds everything. In summer, the castle is stuffy and flies are everywhere. They buzz around the food, land on your face, crawl across your hands. You wave them away, but they just circle and come back. They're attracted to the spoiled food in the rushes, the sweat on your skin, the general filth that's unavoidable. You eat your meals with one hand and swat flies with the other, and inevitably a few end up in your food. You fish them out and keep eating because you're too hungry to care. In winter, the cold is all-consuming. Your fingers and toes go numb. You can't feel your nose. Your breath comes out in clouds of mist. The fire in the great hall helps, but only a little. You huddle as close as you dare, but if you get too close, the smoke makes your eyes water and your throat burn. You're constantly shivering, your muscles tight, your body trying to generate warmth. You wear every piece of clothing you own, layering them until you look like a lumpy, jingling scarecrow. It doesn't help much. The cold finds its way through, and you spend the entire winter miserably uncomfortable. Your health is a constant concern. There's no modern medicine. If you get sick, you're at the mercy of folk remedies and prayers. Healers exist, but their methods are hit or miss. You might be given a foul-tasting herbal brew that may or may not help. You might be told to rest, which is impossible because you still have to perform. More likely, you just push through, working while you're feverish and achy, because there's no such thing as sick leave. The Lord doesn't care if you're feeling under the weather. You're expected to be funny regardless. Injuries are common. You take a hard fall during a tumbling routine and land on your shoulder. It throbs for days, a deep ache that makes it hard to lift your arm. You juggle through the pain, adjusting your throws to compensate, hoping it heals on its own. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and you're left with a lingering weakness or a joint that clicks unnervingly when you move it. You twist your ankle stepping off a bench during a performance. It swells up, tight and hot, and every step is a hobble. You wrap it with strips of cloth and keep going, because what else can you do? The food situation remains dire. You're always slightly hungry, never quite full. The meals you do get are heavy on bread and light on everything else. Vegetables are sparse and usually overcooked into mush. Meat is a rare treat, and when you get it, it's the tough, gristly bits that no one else wanted. You gnaw on it until your jaw aches, extracting what little flavour and nutrition you can. The lack of variety is numbing. It's bread and cheese and weak beer, day after day, until you can barely remember what fresh fruit tastes like. Occasionally, you get a treat. A feast is held, and the Lord is in a generous mood. You're allowed to eat from the leftover platters, and for once there's actual good food. Roast meat with crispy skin, pies filled with rich gravy, pastries sweetened with honey. You eat until your stomach aches, knowing it might be weeks before you get another chance. The next day you feel sluggish and queasy, your body unused to such richness, but it was worth it for those few moments of indulgence, the memory of which will sustain you through the next stretch of bland, insufficient meals. The castle's inhabitants are a mixed bunch, and dealing with them is part of your daily struggle. The Lord is the most important, of course. His mood dictates your entire day. If he wakes up cheerful, things are relatively easy. He'll laugh at your jokes, maybe even reward you with a coin or an extra portion of food. If he wakes up grumpy, you're walking on eggshells. Every joke has to be carefully chosen. Too bold, and you risk his anger. Too timid, and he'll call you boring. You watch him constantly, reading his face, his posture, the tone of his voice, trying to anticipate what he wants before he asks for it. The Lord's temper is legendary. He's used to getting his way, and when things don't go according to plan, he lashes out. You've seen him throw goblets, overturn tables, shout at servants until they're trembling. As the Jester, you're sometimes expected to diffuse these situations with humour. It's a dangerous game. Make him laugh, and you're a hero. Fail, and you become the new target of his rage. You've learned to have a few reliable bits ready, the kind of physical comedy that's almost impossible not to laugh at. A well-timed pratfall, a ridiculous facial expression, a bit of absurd wordplay that catches him off guard. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you just have to ride out the storm. The lady of the castle is another challenge. She's often more refined than her husband, with higher standards for entertainment. She doesn't find crude physical humour as amusing. She prefers wit, cleverness, a more subtle approach. So you have to switch modes depending on your audience. Performing for the Lord means big, broad gestures and obvious jokes. Performing for the lady means restraint, timing, a defter touch. Performing for both at once means trying to balance both styles, which is like juggling while riding a horse. It requires intense concentration and a bit of luck. Then there are the guests. The castle frequently hosts visitors, neighbouring nobles, travelling merchants, distant relatives. Each one has their own sense of humour, their own sensitivities. A joke that kills with one audience falls flat with another. You have to adapt on the fly, reading the room, adjusting your material. A merchant might appreciate jokes about trade and travel. A noble might enjoy humour at the expense of their rivals. A clergyman requires a much more careful approach, avoiding anything that might be seen as disrespectful or irreverent. You become a chameleon, shifting your persona to match the audience, exhausting yourself in the process. The household guards are a rough crowd. They spend their days training, patrolling, and generally being tough. They appreciate direct, simple humour. Insults, pratfalls, anything involving someone getting knocked on their backside. They're also quick to test you, to see if you can take what you dish out. They'll heckle you during a performance, throw out a jab to see how you respond. If you get flustered, you lose their respect. If you fire back with a good comeback, they'll laugh and accept you as one of their own. It's a constant test, proving yourself over and over. The kitchen staff are crucial allies. They control the food, and staying on their good side can mean the difference between eating well and going hungry. You make sure to entertain them when you get the chance, performing in the kitchen while they work, making them laugh with impressions of the nobles. In return, they slip you scraps, a bit of meat here, a pastry there. The head cook is a formidable figure, ruling the kitchen with an iron fist and a wooden spoon. Cross her, and you'll find your meals getting smaller and less appetizing. Keep her happy, and she'll look after you as best she can. The stable hands and grooms work outside, dealing with the horses and other animals. They're a practical, no-nonsense group, covered in mud and hay and the unmistakable smell of horse dung. You venture out to the stables sometimes, partly to escape the stuffiness of the castle, and partly to maintain good relations. The stables are warmer than you'd expect, thanks to the body heat of the animals, but the smell is intense. Fresh dung, old dung, urine-soaked straw, the musky scent of horses. It's a thick, heavy odor that clings to your clothes and hair. You breathe through your mouth and try not to think about it. The horses themselves are massive, powerful creatures. They're beautiful in a way, but also intimidating. One wrong move and you could be kicked or bitten. The stable hands handle them with ease, but you keep your distance, content to watch from a safe spot. Occasionally you're asked to perform for a guest who's visiting the stables, inspecting a new horse or preparing for a hunt. You do your routine while standing in the muck, your shoes squelching with every step, trying to ignore the curious stares of the horses and the persistent flies. The castle's animals are everywhere. Dogs roam freely, scavenging for food. They're lean and scrappy, covered in scars from fights with each other. They're not pets in the modern sense. They're working animals used for hunting, and they're treated as such. They'll snap at you if you get too close to their food. They'll bark at you for no reason. They sleep in the hall, sprawled across the floor, and you have to step over them carefully to avoid waking them and getting snarled at. Cats are also present, though they're more independent. They hunt mice and rats, which are a constant problem in the castle. You see them slinking along the walls, disappearing into cracks and shadows. Occasionally a cat will leave a dead mouse as a gift, dropping it somewhere inconvenient like the middle of the Great Hall. Someone has to pick it up and dispose of it, usually a servant, while everyone else wrinkles their nose and makes disgusted noises. The cats themselves are half wild, tolerating human presence but not inviting it. The rats are bold, venturing out even during the day. You see them scurrying along the edges of the room, their tails whipping behind them. At night, they're even more active, squeaking and scratching in the walls. You've woken up more than once to find a rat sitting on your chest, its whiskers twitching as it investigates you. You yelp and flail, and it leaps off and disappears. Your heart pounds and you lie awake for the rest of the night, listening for the sound of tiny claws. Vermin are a fact of life. Mice, rats, fleas, lice, flies. They're all part of the ecosystem of the castle. You can try to control them, but you'll never get rid of them entirely. The cats help, but there are always more rodents. The dogs scratch at fleas and so do you. It's a losing battle, and eventually you just accept it. You share your living space with a host of uninvited guests, and there's nothing you can do about it. The seasonal changes bring new challenges. Spring means mud. The castle grounds turn into a swamp. Every path is a slick, sticky mess. You step outside, and within seconds your shoes are caked with mud. It squelches between your toes, cold and gritty. You track it inside, adding to the muck on the floor. Everyone does. The rushes become saturated, a soggy mat that never quite dries out. The smell intensifies, a damp, earthy funk mixed with all the usual odours. Summer brings heat, and with it, a whole new set of problems. The castle, so cold in winter, becomes stuffy and stifling. The stone walls trap the heat. The air is thick and hard to breathe. Sweat pours off you during performances, soaking through your costume. The fabric clings to your skin, chafing with every movement. Your face is flushed, your hair plastered to your forehead. You drink weak beer by the gallon, trying to stay hydrated, but it never feels like enough. The props and tools of your trade are deceptively simple, but require constant maintenance and care. Your juggling balls are made of leather stuffed with sawdust, stitched together with thick thread. Over time, the stitching comes loose. The leather wears thin. Sawdust leaks out, leaving a little trail wherever you practice. You have to repair them yourself, sitting in a corner with a needle and thread, your fingers clumsy and sore. The needle is blunt, requiring real force to push through the leather. You stab yourself more than once, your fingertip throbbing, a tiny red mark welling up. You curse under your breath and keep stitching. You have other props too. Wooden clubs for a more impressive juggling display. A set of rings, a small drum, a simple stringed instrument that you can barely play but can strum well enough to accompany a bawdy song. All of it has to be kept in reasonable condition. The drum's skin stretches and goes slack, needing tightening. The instrument's strings snap and replacements are hard to come by. You make do with what you have, improvising when something breaks, adapting your act around your failing equipment. Your costume, as mentioned, is a constant source of frustration, but it's also essential. Without the costume, you're just another person. The bright colours, the bells, the absurd hat, they signal to everyone that you're the Jester. They set you apart. When you put on the costume, you're stepping into a role, becoming a character. It's a kind of armour, in a way. When people laugh at you, they're laughing at the Jester, not at the person underneath. That distinction helps you cope with the constant mockery and humiliation. But wearing the costume day after day takes a toll. The fabric chafes at your neck, under your arms, around your waist. You develop raw spots that sting when the fabric rubs against them. You try to pad the areas with extra cloth, but it doesn't help much. The tightness restricts your breathing during intense physical exertion. You're tumbling and cartwheeling, and you can't quite get a full breath. Your chest feels compressed, your lungs straining. You gasp and pant, and the audience laughs, thinking it's part of the act. In a way, it is. Everything is part of the act. The makeup and face paint are another layer. On special occasions, you're expected to paint your face, exaggerating your features to make them more comedic. The paint is made from crushed minerals and plant dyes mixed with grease. It's thick and heavy, sitting on your skin like a mask. It smells faintly oily and earthy. It gets into your pores, and by the end of the day, your face feels clogged and itchy. Removing it is a challenge. You scrub at your face with a rag and cold water, but the paint doesn't come off easily. You rub and rub, your skin turning red and sore, until finally, most of it is gone. There's always a bit left, a faint tint in the creases of your face, a reminder of the performance. Your routines have to be constantly refreshed. You can't do the same act over and over, or people get bored. You need new material, new jokes, new tricks. Coming up with fresh content is harder than it sounds. You spend your rare, free moments brainstorming, trying to think of something funny. You watch the people around you, looking for quirks and habits you can mimic. You listen to conversations, picking up phrases and stories you can twist into jokes. It's mentally exhausting, this constant pressure to be creative and original. Sometimes inspiration strikes, and you come up with a bit that's genuinely funny. The first time you perform it, the audience roars with laughter. You feel a rush of satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment, but then you have to do it again, and again, and again. What was fresh and spontaneous becomes routine and mechanical. You go through the motions, hitting the same beats, saying the same lines. The audience still laughs, but for you, the joy is gone. It's just work. Physical comedy is reliable but punishing. A well-executed pratfall always gets a laugh. You throw yourself to the ground, landing hard on your hip or shoulder. The impact jars your bones. Pain radiates through your body. You lie there for a beat, letting the audience laugh, and then you spring up as if nothing happened. You grin and bow, and inside, you're cataloguing the new bruise you just earned. Over time, your body becomes a map of old injuries. Every ache has a story. That twinge in your knee is from the time you slipped on a greasy patch of floor. The stiffness in your shoulder is from an overly ambitious tumble that didn't quite land right. You also have to deal with hecklers. Not everyone finds you funny. Some people think jesters are beneath them, a waste of time and resources. They'll make snide comments, loud enough for you to hear. They'll talk over your performance, deliberately ignoring you. It's disrespectful and infuriating, but you can't show it. You have to stay in character, keep smiling, keep performing. Sometimes you can win them over with a well-placed joke at their expense. The rest of the audience will laugh, and the heckler will be shamed into silence. Other times you just have to endure it, pretending you don't notice, even as their words sting. The power dynamics are always in play. The nobles can say and do whatever they want. You, on the other hand, have to be careful. You can mock them, but only in a way that's acceptable. Too much truth, and you've crossed a line. The humour has to have an edge, but it can't cut too deep. It's a delicate balance, and you don't always get it right. When you misstep, the atmosphere in the room changes. The laughter stops. There's a tense silence. You scramble to recover, throwing in a silly face or a self-deprecating joke, trying to diffuse the tension. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you're dismissed in disgrace, left to wonder if you've just lost your position. The loneliness is pervasive. You're surrounded by people all day, but you're not truly part of any group. You're not a noble, not a servant, not a guard. You're a jester, a category unto yourself. You don't have peers, not really. Other entertainers come and go, but they're competitors, not friends. You can't confide in the nobles because they see you as a source of amusement, not a person. You can't confide in the servants because they're dealing with their own problems and don't have time for yours. So you keep everything inside, smiling and joking on the outside, lonely and exhausted on the inside. The lack of future prospects is also depressing. You're not building towards anything. There's no promotion, no advancement. You'll be a jester until you're too old or too injured to perform. And then what? There's no pension, no retirement plan. You'll be cast out, left to fend for yourself. You try not to think about it, but sometimes, late at night, the fear creeps in. What happens when you can't do this anymore? Where will you go? Who will take care of you? The questions hang in the dark, unanswered and unanswerable. Money, when you get it, is unpredictable. The Lord might toss you a coin after a particularly good performance. A guest might tip you, but it's never regular, never reliable. You hoard what little you get, hiding it in a small pouch that you keep on your person at all times. You don't trust anyone not to steal it. The amount you accumulate is pitiful, nowhere near enough to buy your freedom or start a new life. It's just a small buffer against disaster, a few coins that might buy you a meal or a night's shelter if you ever find yourself out on the street. Your dreams, what few you allow yourself, are modest. A full stomach, a warm bed, a day without pain. These are the things you wish for, not wealth or fame. You're too beaten down by the daily grind to imagine anything grander. You fantasize about sleeping in, about waking up naturally instead of being jolted awake by roosters. You imagine eating a meal without having to perform for it, sitting down and taking your time, savoring each bite. These small comforts seem impossibly luxurious, and you know you'll probably never have them. The Great Hall is the center of your working life, and it's a space that assaults all your senses at once. The floor is covered in those wretched rushes, which are supposed to be changed regularly, but rarely are. They're meant to absorb spills and provide a bit of cushioning, but mostly they just rot slowly, creating a spongy, foul-smelling carpet. When you walk across them, your feet sink slightly, and you feel the give of decomposing plant matter underneath. Sometimes you step on something solid buried in the rushes, a bone, a chunk of stale bread, something unidentifiable, and it crunches or squelches under your weight. The smell in the great hall is a layered thing. At the base is the mustiness of stone and damp. On top of that, the sour tang of spilled beer and wine that's soaked into the rushes. Then the greasy, fatty smell of cooked meat, which is appealing when you're hungry, but cloying when you're not. Add in the body odour of dozens of people who bathe infrequently, the smoke from the fire, the wet dog smell of the hounds, and the occasional sharp note of something truly foul when someone steps in dog mess tracked in from outside. It all blends into a signature scent that you can taste at the back of your throat. The fire is always burning in the massive hearth at one end of the hall. It's necessary for warmth and for cooking, but it's also a smoky, temperamental beast. The chimney doesn't draw properly, so smoke often billows back into the room. Your eyes water, your throat feels scratchy. Everyone is coughing and blinking, but no one does anything about it, because this is just how things are. You position yourself as far from the fire as you can while still being visible, trying to find a sweet spot where you're not freezing, but also not choking on smoke. The acoustics in the hall are terrible for a performer. The high stone ceiling and bare walls create echoes that muddy your words. You have to project loudly, almost shouting, to be heard over the ambient noise. By the end of the day, your voice is hoarse, your throat raw. You drink weak beer to soothe it, but that only helps so much. The constant strain takes a toll, and sometimes you wake up barely able to speak. Those are bad days, when you have to rely entirely on physical comedy and pantomime, your voice reduced to a raspy croak. The lighting is dim at best. During the day, narrow windows let in thin shafts of sunlight, but they don't illuminate much. Torches and candles provide additional light, but they're expensive and used sparingly. Shadows pool in the corners. It's hard to see faces clearly unless you're very close. Performing in this gloom is a challenge. You can't rely on subtle facial expressions because half the audience can't see them. Everything has to be big and obvious. Exaggerated gestures, loud voices, broad physical movements. Subtlety is wasted here. The Great Hall is also a multi-purpose space. It's where meals are served, where the Lord conducts business, where people gather to socialize. It's never empty, never quiet. You're trying to perform, and servants are weaving through the crowd with trays of food. Dogs are barking and fighting over scraps. Someone is arguing loudly in the corner. A child? No, wait, you're not supposed to mention them. A young servant is clattering dishes, the noise echoing off the stone. You have to compete with all of this, fighting for attention, raising your voice, moving more energetically, doing whatever it takes to hold the audience's focus. Meal times are particularly chaotic. The trestle tables are set up, and people crowd onto the benches. The Lord and his immediate family sit at a raised table on a dais, looking down on everyone else. You perform in the space in front of the dais, the centre of attention but also uncomfortably exposed. If the Lord is displeased, everyone sees it. If you mess up, there's no hiding. The pressure is immense. You juggle and jest and tumble, your heart pounding, hyper-aware of every reaction. The food is brought out in waves. Servants carry in huge platters, and the smell is intoxicating. Roast fowl, baked fish, meat pies, loaves of bread still warm from the oven. Your stomach growls audibly. You haven't eaten since your meagre breakfast, and the sight and smell of all that food is torture. You watch as the nobles tear into the meal, grease dripping from their fingers, their mouths full, talking and laughing with food visible between their teeth. Manners are different here. Eating is a vigorous, enthusiastic affair. Belching is common and often greeted with laughter. You keep performing, your mouth watering, your stomach cramping with hunger. Scraps are tossed to the dogs who fight over them with snarls and snaps. Occasionally, a particularly enthusiastic eater will throw a bone in your direction, either as a reward or as a joke. You catch it if you can, turning it into part of your act, pretending to gnaw on it like a dog. The audience laughs. You set the bone aside, hoping to retrieve it later, and actually gnaw the last bits of meat off it when no one's watching. Waste is a sin when you're this hungry. The nobles drink heavily during meals. Wine and beer flow freely. As the evening progresses, they get louder, more boisterous. Jokes that weren't funny earlier suddenly get uproarious laughs. Your job gets easier in some ways because they are less critical, but it also gets harder because they're less predictable. Someone might decide it's hilarious to grab you and force you to drink from their goblet. You choke down the wine, which is sour and strong, and stagger away to laughter and applause. Your head spins. You're not used to drinking anything that potent, and it goes straight to your head. You have to keep performing while slightly tipsy, which adds a layer of difficulty to everything. Occasionally the Lord demands a specific performance. He's heard about a trick or a song, and he wants to see it now. You might not know it. You might not have the right props. It doesn't matter. He wants it, so you have to deliver. You improvise frantically, cobbling together something that's close enough to satisfy him. Sometimes he's pleased, sometimes he's not, and you can see the disappointment on his face. You scramble to recover, throwing in extra tricks, working twice as hard to win back his favor. Guests are a wild card. When important visitors arrive, the stakes are even higher. The Lord wants to impress them, and you're part of that effort. You're expected to be at your absolute best. You prepare your finest material, the routines you've perfected over months. You perform with everything you've got, every ounce of energy and skill. The guests watch with polite interest, occasionally laughing. Their approval is crucial. If they're entertained, the Lord is happy. If they're not, you'll hear about it later. Sometimes a guest will bring their own entertainer, and you're suddenly in competition. A musician, an acrobat, a storyteller. You have to share the spotlight, or worse, you're pushed aside entirely. You watch from the sidelines as the other performer wows the crowd. Jealousy and resentment burn in your chest, but you keep your face neutral. Later, when you get another chance, you make sure to bring your absolute best. You can't let some outsider show you up in your own hall. The politics of the castle filter down to you. The Lord is in a dispute with a neighbour, and suddenly jokes about that neighbour are encouraged. You craft barbs and insults, delivering them with a smile. The audience eats it up, but you have to be careful. That same neighbour might visit next month, and then those jokes become dangerous. You have to have a good memory, keeping track of who's in favour and who's not, adjusting your material accordingly. It's exhausting, this constant mental juggling. Your relationship with the other castle staff is complex and ever-shifting. Everyone is trying to survive, to carve out a slightly more comfortable existence in a harsh world. Alliances form and dissolve based on convenience and necessity. You help a servant one day, and they remember it, returning the favour when you need it. You slight someone else, even accidentally, and they find subtle ways to make your life harder. The social web is intricate and delicate, and you're constantly navigating it. The laundry workers, for instance, are a group you try to stay on good terms with. They're responsible for washing linens and clothes, a back-breaking job that involves hauling water, heating it over fires, scrubbing fabric with harsh soap and wringing everything out by hand. Their hands are red and chapped, their backs permanently bent from years of labour. You bring them a joke or a song when you can, a bit of entertainment to break up their monotonous work. In return, they might wash your Jester outfit a bit more carefully, or give it priority so you're not stuck wearing a damp costume. The brewers work in a separate building, producing the weak beer that everyone drinks. The smell around the brewery is a mix of yeast, fermented grain, and something vaguely sour. It's not unpleasant exactly, but it's strong and pervasive. The brewers are usually cheerful, perhaps because they're sampling their product throughout the day. They're generous with their beer, offering you a mug when you visit. You drink it gratefully, even though it's warm and flat. It's still better than the water, which comes from a well that's probably contaminated with all sorts of unpleasant things. The bakers start work in the middle of the night, so their schedules are completely opposite to everyone else's. The bakery is one of the warmest places in the castle, thanks to the massive ovens that are always fired up. You sometimes sneak in during the coldest winter nights, just to thaw out for a few minutes. The bakers tolerate your presence, though they're too busy to chat. The smell of baking bread is heavenly, and you linger as long as you dare, breathing in the warm, yeasty air. If you're lucky, a baker might hand you a small roll fresh from the oven. You tear into it immediately, the crust crackling, the interior soft and steaming. It's a moment of pure bliss in an otherwise difficult day. The gardeners and groundskeepers work outdoors in all weather. In summer, they're tanned and sweaty, covered in dirt from tending the vegetable gardens and maintaining the grounds. In winter, they're bundled up and miserable, their faces red and chapped from the cold wind. They're a hardy, practical bunch, not much interested in jokes or performances. You respect them for their resilience, and they tolerate you as long as you don't get in the way. The falconer is a specialist, responsible for the Lord's hunting birds. He's a solitary figure, spending most of his time with his hawks and falcons. The birds are beautiful and deadly, their eyes sharp and unblinking. You're a bit afraid of them, if you're honest. Those talons and beaks could do serious damage. The falconer speaks to his birds more than he speaks to people, murmuring to them in a low, soothing voice. You've performed for him a few times when he's had visitors, but he's a tough audience, more interested in his birds than in your antics. The huntsmen are loud, boisterous men who spend their days tracking game through the forests. They come back muddy and exhausted, carrying deer or boar strung up on poles. The hunt is a major source of fresh meat for the castle, and a successful hunt means a feast. You're always happy to see the huntsman return with a kill, because it means better food for everyone. They're a rough crowd, quick to laugh but also quick to anger. You tread carefully around them, playing to their sense of humour without overstepping. The carpenter and the blacksmith are essential tradesmen, constantly busy with repairs and new projects. The blacksmith's forge is a hot, noisy place. The clang of hammer on metal rings out at all hours. The smith is a powerful figure, muscles honed by years of swinging a hammer. He's usually covered in soot and sweat, his hands scarred from burns and cuts. You admire his skill, the way he shapes raw metal into useful tools and objects. He has little time for entertainment, but when he does take a break, he appreciates a good joke. The carpenter works in a space filled with wood shavings and the smell of sawdust. He's meticulous and patient, crafting furniture and repairing the endless list of broken things in the castle. You've commissioned a few small items from him over the years, a new prop, a replacement for something that broke. He charges you fairly, recognizing that you don't have much money. You repay him with performances, entertaining his apprentices while they work. The healer is a mysterious figure, part physician, part herbalist, part mystic. People visit the healer when they're sick or injured, and she does what she can with the limited knowledge and resources available. Her remedies are hit or miss, Some work remarkably well, others do nothing, or even make things worse. She has a small room filled with dried herbs, strange powders, and clay pots of ointments. The smell is pungent and medicinal, a mix of sharp, bitter, and earthy scents. You've been to see her a few times for various ailments: a persistent cough, a twisted ankle, a rash that wouldn't go away. She gave you a salve or a tea, offered some advice, and sent you on your way. You're not sure if her treatments helped or if you just got better on your own, but you're grateful for the attention nonetheless. The chaplain is a presence in the castle, though his influence varies depending on the Lord's piety. He conducts services, offers counsel, and oversees religious observances. You have to be careful around him. Humour that's acceptable in the Great Hall might be seen as blasphemous in a religious context. You've learned to tone down your act when he's around, avoiding anything that could be construed as disrespectful. He's not without a sense of humour, but it's a refined, restrained sort of humour that doesn't align well with your usual style. The steward is the Lord's right-hand man, managing the household and overseeing the staff. He's a busy, officious figure, always carrying a ledger or a sheaf of papers. He's not unkind, but he's focused on efficiency and order. You're a bit of a nuisance to him, a variable that doesn't fit neatly into his schedules and plans. You try to stay out of his way, and he mostly ignores you unless there's a specific issue. When he does address you, it's usually a reminder of some expectation, or a mild reprimand for some minor transgression. The gate guards control who enters and leaves the castle. They're a bored, watchful group standing at their posts for hours at a time. You chat with them when you pass by, offering a joke or a bit of gossip. They appreciate the distraction, and in return, they give you news from the outside world. Travellers, merchants, messengers, all pass through the gate, and the guards hear all the latest rumours and stories. You file away the information, using it to craft new material for your performances. The castle's hierarchy is rigid, but there are moments of solidarity among the lower ranks. A servant drops a tray, and everyone pitches in to clean up the mess before the steward notices. A guard falls asleep on duty, and his comrades cover for him. You help where you can, and others help you. It's an unspoken agreement. We're all in this together, trying to get through each day without making things worse. But there's also competition and resentment. Resources are limited, and everyone is scrambling for a slightly larger share. A servant might sabotage your performance because they see you as getting special treatment. A guard might trip you accidentally because he thinks you're soft and useless. You have to be constantly vigilant, watching for threats from all directions. It's exhausting, this constant state of low-level conflict. The travel that comes with being a jester is less glamorous than it sounds. When the Lord travels to another estate or attends a gathering, you're expected to come along to provide entertainment. Travelling in medieval times is uncomfortable, slow, and fraught with inconvenience. The roads are rough tracks, rutted and muddy, barely maintained. When it rains, they become quagmires. The cart or wagon you're riding in lurches and jolts over every bump and hole. You're sitting on a hard wooden bench or worse, standing in the back, clinging to the side to keep from being thrown out. The motion is relentless. Every jolt sends a shock up your spine. Your teeth rattle, your bones ache. After an hour, you're stiff and sore. After several hours, you're in genuine pain. There's no suspension, no cushioning. It's just you, a wooden cart, and a road that seems designed to inflict maximum discomfort. You try shifting positions, but there's limited space and nowhere comfortable to sit. You end up in a kind of numb endurance mode, gritting your teeth and waiting for the journey to end. The pace is painfully slow. Horses pulling a loaded cart don't move quickly. You cover maybe 20 or 30 miles in a full day of travel, assuming the weather cooperates and nothing goes wrong. Something always goes wrong. A wheel gets stuck in the mud and has to be pried out. A horse throws a shoe and has to be reshod. The whole caravan stops, and everyone stands around waiting while the problem is fixed. You're stuck in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by fields or forests, with nothing to do but wait. The weather is a constant factor. If it's sunny, you're roasting. There's no shade in the back of a cart, and the sun beats down mercilessly. Sweat soaks through your clothes. Your face burns, turning red and tender. You're thirsty all the time, and the water you have is warm and stale, carried in a leather skin that gives it a musty flavour. If it rains, you're drenched within minutes. There's no cover, no shelter. The rain is cold and relentless, soaking through your clothes to your skin. You shiver and huddle, trying to stay as dry as possible, but it's hopeless. The mud is unbelievable. The wheels sink deep, and the horses strain to pull the cart forward. Sometimes you have to get out and push, adding your strength to theirs. You wade through mud that comes up to your shins, cold and slick. It sucks at your shoes, threatening to pull them off. When you finally get back in the cart, you're covered in muck from the knees down. It dries into a stiff crust, chafing against your skin. At the end of the day, you try to scrape it off, but there's never a good place to wash. You go to bed muddy and wake up muddy, and the cycle repeats. Accommodation on the road is basic at best. If you're lucky, you stop at an inn. The Lord and his immediate party get rooms. You and the other lower-ranking members of the group sleep in the common room, on the floor, wrapped in whatever blanket or cloak you brought. The common room is crowded and noisy. Other travellers are doing the same thing, all of you packed together like sardines. The floor is hard, usually just wooden planks or packed dirt. You lie down, trying to find a position that doesn't hurt, and fail. Every part of your body is in contact with something uncomfortable. The inn smells like every inn. Smoke, stale beer, unwashed bodies, and something faintly rancid from the kitchen. The food is questionable. You're served a bowl of stew that's been simmering for who knows how long. The meat is gristly and hard to identify. The vegetables are mushy. The broth is greasy and salty. You eat it anyway, because you're hungry and it's warm. At least the beer is plentiful, and you drink enough to dull the aches and help you fall asleep despite the discomfort. If there's no inn, you camp in the open. Tents are set up for the Lord and his close companions. You sleep under the stars, or under a tree if it rains. The ground is cold and hard, worse than any floor. Rocks jab into your back. Roots create lumps that you can't avoid. You lie there, staring up at the sky, too uncomfortable to sleep, but too tired to stay awake. You drift in and out of a restless doze, waking every time you shift positions or a strange noise catches your attention. The forest at night is unnerving. Strange sounds echo through the trees, animals rustling in the underbrush, the hoot of an owl, the distant howl of a wolf. Your imagination runs wild, conjuring up dangers in the darkness. You tell yourself it's fine, that the guards are keeping watch, but it's hard to shake the unease. You pull your cloak tighter and try to ignore the prickling feeling on the back of your neck. Meals on the road are sparse and monotonous. Bread, cheese, dried meat if you're lucky. Everything is hard and requires serious chewing. The dried meat is tough as leather, salty and chewy. You gnaw on it for ages, extracting what little flavour and moisture it offers. The cheese is firm and crumbly, with a sharp tang that's not unpleasant but gets old quickly. The bread is the same dense, heavy stuff you eat at the castle. You wash it all down with beer or water, neither of which is particularly refreshing. Performing on the road adds another layer of difficulty. You're expected to entertain in whatever space is available. Sometimes it's a great hall similar to the one at the castle. More often, it's a smaller, more cramped space. You adjust your act, scaling it down, focusing on jokes and songs rather than acrobatics. The audiences are different too, often less sophisticated, more easily amused. A crude joke that might fall flat at the castle gets roars of laughter at a rural manor. You tailor your performance to the crowd, reading the room and giving them what they want. Sometimes you perform outdoors in a courtyard or a field. The acoustics are terrible. Your voice disappears into the open air. People at the back can't hear you, and they get restless. You project as loudly as you can, practically shouting, but it's a struggle. The wind picks up, and your hat blows off. You chase after it, turning the mishap into part of the act, and the audience laughs. You retrieve the hat, jam it back on your head, and keep going, your face flushed with exertion and embarrassment. The journey takes a toll on your props. Juggling balls get lost or damaged. The drum gets dented. The instrument's strings snap from the jostling and the changes in temperature and humidity. You do your best to repair things on the go, but you're not a craftsman. Your repairs are makeshift at best. The juggling balls are patched with scraps of cloth. The drum is held together with extra cord. The instrument sounds worse and worse, but you keep using it because it's all you have. Your costume suffers too. The constant wear, the mud, the rain, it all takes a toll. Seams split, the fabric tears, bells fall off, lost somewhere along the road. You stitch things back together at night by the light of a fire, your fingers numb and clumsy. The repairs are obvious, lumpy patches that make the costume look even more ridiculous. But there's no alternative. This is your work uniform, and you have to maintain it as best you can. The return journey is no better than the outward one. You're tired from days of travel and performance. The novelty is worn off, and now it's just a slog. The same bumpy roads, the same discomfort, the same slow progress. You watch the familiar landmarks pass by, counting down the miles until you're back at the castle. When you finally arrive, you're exhausted and filthy. You want nothing more than to collapse and sleep for a week. But there's no time for that. The Lord wants to be entertained. Life at the castle resumes immediately and you're thrust back into your routine. The castle's storage areas are a world unto themselves, and you become familiar with them through necessity. The cellars are dark, damp spaces carved into the rock beneath the castle. Stone steps lead down, worn smooth by centuries of feet. The air grows colder as you descend, and there's a musty smell of earth and stone. The cellars are where food is stored, where barrels of beer and wine are kept, where anything that needs to be cool and dark is housed. You venture down occasionally, sent to fetch something, or simply exploring during a rare free moment. The darkness is oppressive. Torches are few and far between, their flickering light creating dancing shadows that play tricks on your eyes. You move carefully, your hand trailing along the damp stone wall for guidance. The floor is uneven, and you've tripped more than once, barking your shin on a barrel or catching your foot on a raised stone. The pain is sharp and immediate, bringing tears to your eyes. You hop on one foot, cursing under your breath, waiting for the throbbing to subside enough that you can continue. The stores of food are both tantalizing and depressing. Wheels of cheese sit on wooden shelves, their rinds hard and waxy. Hanging from the ceiling are links of sausages, sides of bacon, dried fish. Everything is preserved, salted, smoked, or dried to within an inch of its life. You see the abundance and know that very little of it will make its way to your plate. This is the Lord's food, carefully inventoried and guarded. Taking even a small piece without permission would be theft, punishable harshly. The The grain stores are kept in a separate area, massive sacks piled high. The mice and rats know about these stores too, and there's an ongoing battle to keep them out. Cats prowl the shadows, and you sometimes hear the sudden squeak of a rodent meeting its end. The grain itself has a dry, dusty smell. Sometimes you can hear faint rustling from inside the sacks, evidence that the vermin are winning the battle. The thought of what might be contaminating the grain is unpleasant, but there's nothing to be done about it. Everyone eats the bread made from this grain, and everyone hopes for the best. The wine cellar is the Lord's pride. Barrels and bottles are arranged carefully, some of them quite valuable. The smell here is different, a sour-sweet mix of fermentation and wood. You're rarely allowed in this area unsupervised. The Lord doesn't trust anyone around his precious wine. You've performed in the wine cellar once when a visiting noble wanted to inspect the collection and demanded entertainment while doing so. You juggled in the cramped space, terrified of knocking over a bottle worth more than you'd earn in a year. The castle's defensive features are everywhere, constant reminders that this is a fortification first and a home second. The walls are thick enough that you can walk inside them in some places, through narrow passages that connect different parts of the castle. These passages are cold and claustrophobic, the stone pressing in on all sides. Your bells echo strangely in the confined space, the sound bouncing back at you. You use these passages sometimes to move around the castle without being seen, though they're hardly pleasant to traverse. The murder holes and arrow slits are practical features that make the interior even colder. Air whistles through the narrow openings, creating persistent drafts. In winter, standing near an arrow slit is like standing in front of an open door. The cold pours in, unstoppable. You watch guards stationed near these openings, their faces red and chapped, their shoulders hunched against the chill. You're glad your duties keep you mostly in the Great Hall, miserable as it is. The stairs are a constant challenge. The castle has them everywhere, spiraling up into towers or leading down to lower levels. The steps are uneven, worn down in the middle from centuries of use. The rise and depth vary unpredictably, so you can never quite find a rhythm. You're always either stretching too far or taking a tiny step, and the inconsistency is maddening. Carrying anything up or down these stairs is treacherous. You've seen servants slip, seen loads tumble down the steps. You grip the wall whenever you navigate them, taking your time, not trusting your tired legs. The doors are heavy oak, bound with iron. They don't close easily, requiring a solid shove to seat them properly. The hinges squeal and groan, announcing every opening and closing. Privacy is impossible when every door broadcasts its use. The latches are stiff, hurting your fingers when you work them. In winter, the metal is so cold it burns to touch. You learn to use a fold of your sleeve to protect your hand, though even that doesn't help much. The windows, such as they are, offer little comfort. The narrow slits let in light, but no view. The larger windows in the Lord's chambers have oiled parchment stretched across them, which lets in light while blocking some of the wind. But parchment tears and repairs are slow. Often there are gaps where the wind pushes through, fluttering the material. The sound is a constant rustle, like dry leaves, that adds to the ambient noise of the castle. The castle's defences also mean there are places you simply can't go. The guard rooms, the armoury, certain towers, these are off limits to someone like you. Armed men watch the entrances, and they're not interested in your jokes. You've tested the boundaries a few times, trying to charm your way past, but it never works. They have their orders, and you're not on the approved list. So you stick to the areas where you're allowed, which are surprisingly limited considering how much of the castle you can see. The view from the higher levels is something you rarely experience, but when you do, it's striking. Looking out over the surrounding countryside, you see a landscape of fields and forests, villages in the distance marked by thin trails of smoke. It's a reminder of how isolated the castle is, its own little world. The people in those villages lead completely different lives, farming and working the land. You wonder sometimes what it would be like to be a farmer instead of a jester, to have your feet in the soil instead of on cold stone. The grass is always greener, as they say, though you suspect farming has its own miseries. The chapel is a quiet space, one of the few in the castle. It's small, with stone benches and a simple altar. The air smells of old incense and candle wax. You come here occasionally, not out of particular piety, but because it's peaceful. No one expects you to perform in the chapel. You can sit on a bench and just breathe for a few minutes. The silence is a gift, though it never lasts long. Someone always comes looking for you, needing you for something, and you're pulled back into the chaos. The seasons affect the castle in ways beyond just temperature. In spring, water seeps through cracks in the stone. Damp patches appear on the walls, dark and spreading. Moss grows in corners where moisture collects. The whole place feels soggy, and everything smells of mildew. Your costume, already far from fresh, develops a musty dampness that never quite dries out. You wear it day after day, the fabric clammy against your skin, and try not to think about what might be growing in the fibers. Summer brings a different problem: insects. Flies are the worst, but there are also moths, beetles, and countless other crawling and flying things. They invade every space, attracted by food and warmth. You wake up with a beetle crawling across your face, its legs tickling your skin. You flail and swat, and it flies off, only to be replaced by another. The constant presence of insects is maddening. They land in your food, buzz in your ears, crawl into your clothes. You become desensitized to it, accepting it as just another unpleasant fact of life. The matter of washing yourself and your belongings is a constant negotiation between necessity and available resources. Water is precious, requiring effort to obtain. The well is deep, and hauling up a bucket is hard work. The rope is rough, burning your palms as you pull hand over hand. The bucket emerges slowly, water sloshing over the sides. By the time you've got it to the top, your arms are shaking. You carry the bucket carefully, trying not to spill more than necessary, but the path is uneven, and you inevitably slosh water onto your shoes and the ground. In winter, the well is even more miserable. The rope is stiff and cold. The bucket rim is icy to the touch. Sometimes a thin layer of ice forms on the water's surface overnight, and it has to be broken before you can draw water. The cold water splashes on your hands, and they go numb instantly. You fumble with the bucket, your fingers clumsy and unresponsive. The walk back to the castle with a bucket of freezing water is torture. The metal handle digs into your palm, and the cold radiates through the container, chilling your whole body. Heating water is another ordeal. You need a pot, a fire, and time. The kitchen fire is always going, but it's constantly in use for cooking. Finding a gap where you can heat your own water requires patience and negotiation. You wait your turn, standing to one side while the cooks bustle around you. When you finally get access, you hang your pot over the flames and wait. The water takes forever to heat, and you have to watch it constantly to make sure no one moves it or claims they need the space more urgently. When you finally have warm water, you take it somewhere semi-private, a corner of a storage room behind a screen in your sleeping area, and strip down to wash. The air is cold on your bare skin, raising goosebumps immediately. You work quickly, dipping a rag into the water and scrubbing at your body. The water is never quite hot enough, cooling rapidly in the cold air. By the time you're halfway done, it's lukewarm at best. You scrub at your armpits, your groin, your feet, the areas that smell the worst. The rag is rough, and your skin turns pink from the friction. The soap is harsh stuff, made from animal fat and lye. It stings when it gets in your eyes or on sensitive skin. It doesn't lather much, instead forming a thin, slippery film. It smells faintly of the tallow it was made from, a greasy animal smell that isn't entirely masked by whatever herbs were added. You scrub and rinse, trying to get the grime off. Your skin feels tight and dry afterwards, almost squeaky. There's no lotion or oil to soothe it, so you just endure the uncomfortable tightness. Drying off is another challenge. The towel, if you can call it that, is a piece of coarse linen that's seen better days. It's stiff and scratchy, barely absorbent. You rub yourself down vigorously, trying to dry off before you freeze. Your teeth chatter, and you hurry to pull your clothes back on. Even after drying, there's a lingering dampness, especially in your hair. It drips onto your collar, cold water sliding down your back. You shiver and try to get close to a fire to finish drying, but there's always someone already occupying the best spot. Washing your costume is a major undertaking that you put off as long as possible. When it finally becomes unbearable, the smell, the stiffness, the visible stains, you dedicate a precious day off to the task. You fill a large basin with water, heat it to a tolerable temperature, and add shavings of soap. Then you immerse the costume and start scrubbing. The bells jingle constantly as you work, an annoying soundtrack to your labor. The fabric is thick and heavy when wet, requiring serious muscle to wring out. The stains are stubborn. Grease, wine, mud, they've all soaked deep into the fibers. You scrub at them with a brush, working the soap in, but many of them refuse to budge. The armpits are particularly bad, the fabric discolored and stiff with accumulated perspiration. You scrub until your arms ache, and still the stains remain, faded but visible. Eventually you give up and rinse the costume thoroughly, dunking it in clean water again and again until the soap is gone. Wringing out the costume is exhausting. You twist the fabric, water streaming out, your hands cramping from the effort. Even after wringing, it's still heavy with moisture. You hang it somewhere to dry, draping it over a line or a railing. In summer, it might dry in a day or two. In winter, it takes a week or more. The damp fabric develops a mildewy smell if it doesn't dry fast enough. You end up wearing a costume that's clean but smells faintly of mold, which is arguably worse than the smell of sweat. Your personal belongings are few and worn. You own a couple of changes of underclothes, though clean is a relative term. You wash them when you wash yourself, scrubbing them in the same basin of water. They're threadbare, full of holes, patched multiple times. The patches don't match, giving them a haphazard appearance, but they're all you have, so you make do. You own a spare pair of shoes, though they're in worse condition than the ones you wear daily. They're a backup for when your current pair finally falls apart completely. You have a small pouch where you keep your meager possessions, a few coins carefully hoarded, a scrap of fabric that you use as a handkerchief, a small knife useful for cutting thread or food, a bit of string, a button. These trivial items are your entire worldly wealth. You guard the pouch carefully, keeping it on your person at all times. Theft is common in the castle, and anything left unattended is likely to disappear. The lack of personal space means you can't really own much anyway. There's nowhere to keep things. No drawer, no chest, no shelf that's yours alone. Everything you own has to be portable, able to fit in that small pouch or be worn on your body. It's a strange way to live, having no anchor, no accumulation of possessions. You're light and mobile, but also rootless and vulnerable. The concept of comfort is almost laughable. There's no soft bed to sink into, no cozy chair to relax in. The closest you get is leaning against a wall when you're too tired to stand upright. The stone is hard and cold, but at least it supports your weight. You've learned to snatch moments of rest wherever you can, sitting on a step, propped in a corner, even standing still with your eyes closed for a few seconds. These micro rests are all that keep you going during the longest days. The deprivation extends to every aspect of life. No privacy, no comfort, no reliable food, no warmth, no cleanliness. You're constantly dirty, constantly tired, constantly uncomfortable. Your body is a catalogue of aches and pains, some sharp and immediate, others dull and chronic. You've stopped expecting things to feel good. The best you hope for is a reduction in how bad they feel. A meal that's merely bland instead of actively unpleasant is a victory. A night where you only wake up 3 times instead of 5 is a triumph. The mental toll is harder to describe, but no less real. The constant performance, the constant vigilance, the constant need to read the room and adjust your behavior. It's exhausting on a deep level. You can never just be yourself. You're always on, always playing the role of the Jester. Even when you're not actively performing, you're aware of being watched, being judged. You've internalized the role to the point where you're not sure where the Jester ends and you begin. The loneliness creeps in during quiet moments. You're surrounded by people, but none of them really know you. They know the Jester, the performer, the fool in the jingling costume. But the person underneath? That's a mystery, even to yourself sometimes. You've buried your real thoughts and feelings so deep that they're hard to access. When you try to examine them to figure out what you actually think or feel about your situation, you find mostly numbness. It's easier not to think too hard, to just keep moving, keep performing, keep surviving. The politics of entertainment are more complex than anyone outside the profession could imagine. You're not just telling jokes and doing tricks. You're navigating a minefield of rivalries, alliances, and unspoken rules. Every performance is a calculation. Who's in the audience? What mood are they in? What's happened recently that might affect how they react? You have to consider all of this in the moment, adjusting your act on the fly. The Lord's favour is your lifeline, but it's fickle and unpredictable. One day you can do no wrong. Your every joke lands perfectly and he's laughing and generous. The next day, the same material falls flat and he's bored or irritable. You can't figure out what changed. Maybe he slept poorly. Maybe he received bad news. Maybe he's just tired of you. You have no way of knowing, so you scramble to adapt, trying different approaches, searching desperately for whatever will make him smile. The lady's opinion matters too, though in different ways. She has influence over the Lord, and if she dislikes you, she can make your life difficult. She might not actively campaign for your removal, but a few pointed comments, a few expressions of distaste, and suddenly the Lord is viewing you differently. You've seen it happen to others. A performer who was in solid standing suddenly finds themselves out of favour, and within weeks they're gone. You make sure to play to the lady whenever possible, tailoring material to her tastes, showing respect and deference. The other nobles are a shifting landscape of potential allies and enemies. A baron visits, and you make sure to flatter him subtly in your performance. Not too much. Obvious flattery is transparent and off-putting, but a joke that makes him look clever, a bit of banter that positions him well, these things are noticed and appreciated. He leaves with a favourable impression, and he might mention to the Lord that he enjoyed the entertainment. That goodwill is valuable, adding to your stock of credibility. But you also have to be careful not to alienate anyone. A joke at someone's expense might seem harmless, but if that person is vindictive, they'll remember. They'll wait for an opportunity to pay you back, and when it comes, it won't be pleasant. You've learned to avoid targeting anyone directly, unless you're absolutely certain it's safe. Better to make fun of yourself, or of abstract concepts, than to risk making an enemy. The guests sometimes bring their own entertainers, and this is where things get really tricky. You're suddenly in competition, and it's not friendly. The other performer wants to impress the host, maybe secure a position, or at least a generous payment. You want to defend your territory, to prove you're the better choice. The result is a tense, unspoken battle, where you're both trying to outdo each other without being obvious about it. You watch the other performer carefully, noting their strengths and weaknesses. They're a musician. You make sure your physical comedy is especially sharp, doing things they can't match. They're an acrobat. You lean into your verbal wit, demonstrating range they don't have. It's exhausting, this constant one-upmanship, but it's necessary. You can't afford to be upstaged in your own castle. Sometimes the competition is friendly, or at least professional. You and the other performer acknowledge each other with nods, maybe even share a drink afterwards. You swap stories and techniques, recognizing that you're both in the same difficult profession. These moments of camaraderie are rare and precious. For a brief time, you're with someone who understands the pressures you face, the constant anxiety, the grind of always having to be on. More often, though, the other performer is hostile or dismissive. They see you as beneath them, a provincial fool working for a minor lord. Their arrogance is infuriating, but you can't let it show. You smile and nod, and then you go out and give the performance of your life, determined to show them up. When you succeed, when the audience clearly prefers you, the satisfaction is sweet. When you don't, when the other performer wins the crowd, the defeat is bitter. You smile and congratulate them, and inside you're seething. The informal hierarchy among entertainers is based on reputation and skill. A famous minstrel commands respect and good treatment. A juggler with decades of experience is acknowledged as a master. You're somewhere in the middle, competent, reliable, but not exceptional. You're aware of your place, and you're constantly trying to climb higher. Every successful performance is a step up. Every failure is a slide back down. There's no standing still in this profession. The pressure to innovate is constant. Audiences get bored easily. A routine that killed last month is stale this month. You need fresh material, new tricks, different angles. But coming up with new content is difficult when you're exhausted and stressed. Your brain feels sluggish, unable to generate the spark of creativity needed. You force it anyway, staying up late, running through possibilities, discarding ideas that don't work. When you finally hit on something good, the relief is enormous. You have new material. You're safe for a while longer. The physical demands of the job never let up. You're not a young person anymore, and your body is showing the wear. Your knees hurt more than they used to. Your back is stiff in the mornings. You can't do the flips and rolls as easily as you once did. You're slowing down, and you know it. The knowledge is terrifying because your value is tied to your physical abilities. When you can't perform the acrobatics anymore, what use are you? You push through the pain, dosing yourself with whatever remedies you can scrounge. A poultice for the sore joints, a tea that's supposed to give you energy, a strong drink to numb the aches. Nothing works particularly well, but the placebo effect and sheer stubbornness keep you going. You tell yourself you just need to make it through today, and then tomorrow you tell yourself the same thing. It's a day-by-day existence, no long-term planning because the future is too uncertain. The younger servants sometimes look at you with pity or curiosity. You're the weird figure in the jingling costume, neither fish nor fowl. Some of them are friendly, asking questions about your work, laughing at your off-duty jokes. Others ignore you or treat you with disdain. You're used to it. You've developed a thick skin over the years, learning not to take every slight personally. But the cumulative effect of all those small dismissals and rejections wears on you. The castle's social events are your busiest times: weddings, feasts, holy days. These are when you're in highest demand. The performances are longer, the expectations higher, the scrutiny more intense. You prepare for weeks, rehearsing new routines, repairing your costume, making sure every prop is in perfect condition. When the day arrives, you're a bundle of nerves and exhaustion. You've barely slept, too anxious about the performance. The event itself is a blur of activity. You're performing multiple sets throughout the day, with only brief breaks to catch your breath. The audience is large and varied, their attention divided among many attractions. You have to work hard to hold their focus, competing with food, drink, conversation, and everything else. You throw yourself into the performance, giving everything you have. By the end, you're drenched in sweat, your voice hoarse, your body screaming in protest. The aftermath is a crash. The adrenaline that kept you going drains away, leaving you hollow and shaking. You find a quiet corner and collapse, too tired to even remove your costume. Someone brings you a plate of leftover food and you eat mechanically, barely tasting it. You're already dreading the next big event, knowing you'll have to go through this all over again. But for now, you just sit and breathe, grateful that it's over. The unpredictability of medieval life means you're constantly dealing with situations you didn't anticipate. A visiting dignitary arrives without warning, and suddenly there's a formal dinner and you're expected to perform. You have no time to prepare, no opportunity to tailor your material. You go out there with your standard repertoire and hope it's appropriate. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and you can feel the awkwardness in the room. You power through, adjusting as best you can, salvaging what you can from the situation. Disease is a constant shadow. Someone in the castle is always sick with something. A cough spreads through the household, and within days, everyone's hacking and wheezing. You try to avoid the sick people, but it's impossible in such close quarters. You feel the tickle in your throat that signals you're next. You dose yourself with honey and herbal teas, trying to ward it off. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you spend the next week performing while feeling like death, your nose running, your head pounding. The lack of medical knowledge means illnesses that could be easily treated today are serious threats. An infected cut can turn nasty quickly. A bad cough can settle into your chest and linger for months. A stomach ailment can leave you weak and dehydrated. You've seen people die from things that seem minor at first. It makes every ache and pain worrying. Is this just fatigue, or is it the start of something worse? You have no way of knowing, so you worry. The castle's sanitation is primitive at best. The latrine pits are breeding grounds for flies and disease. The midden heaps where refuse is dumped are putrid and rank, attracting vermin. The water source might be contaminated, though there's no way to tell until people start getting sick. You're living in conditions that would horrify a modern health inspector, and you're just expected to cope. Everyone is. It's normal. The animals in and around the castle contribute to the general filth. Dogs defecate wherever they please, and no one cleans it up unless it's in a particularly inconvenient spot. Horses leave massive piles in the courtyard. Birds nest in the rafters, and their droppings accumulate on the floor below. You step carefully, watching where you put your feet, but inevitably you miscalculate. Your shoe comes down in something soft and foul. The smell hits you immediately. You scrape your shoe on the edge of a step or a stone, trying to remove the worst of it, but the smell lingers. The casual violence of medieval life is another thing you've had to adjust to. Arguments escalate quickly. You've seen fistfights break out over minor insults. Guards are rough with anyone who steps out of line. Punishments for infractions are harsh and public. You've witnessed floggings, people locked in stocks, other humiliations designed to shame and hurt. You keep your head down and stay out of trouble, knowing that your position offers no protection if you cross the wrong person. The threat of violence hangs over you in subtler ways too. The Lord has absolute authority. If he decides you've offended him, there's no appeal, no recourse. He could have you beaten or thrown out, and no one would question it. You've heard stories of other jesters who pushed too far, who misjudged their patrons' tempers. The stories don't end well. You remember them as cautionary tales, reminders to always err on the side of caution. The military aspects of castle life are ever present. Guards train in the courtyard, the clash of weapons ringing out. The castle is periodically inspected and reinforced. There are drills where everyone practices what to do in case of attack. You're included in these drills, assigned a role in the castle's defense. Your job, it turns out, is to help distribute supplies and assist wherever needed. It's not glamorous, but everyone has to contribute. The possibility of actual conflict is remote but real. The Lord has rivals. There are disputes over land and titles. Most of these are settled through negotiation or legal proceedings. But occasionally, things turn violent. You've never experienced a siege, but you've heard the stories. The idea of being trapped in the castle, supplies dwindling, enemies outside. It's terrifying. You hope you never have to live through it, but you know it's a possibility. The weapons in the armory are a reminder of the castle's primary purpose. Swords, spears, axes, bows, all the tools of war maintained and ready. You've glimpsed them during performances for the guards or when passing by. They're brutal, functional objects designed to kill. The sight of them is sobering. This place, for all its feasts and entertainment, is fundamentally a military installation. The arrival of news from outside is always an event. Messengers ride in with letters and reports. Everyone gathers to hear the latest. Wars, political marriages, deaths, scandals. The news filters down through the household, distorted and embellished with each retelling. You listen carefully, filing away information that might be useful for your performances. A recent event might be ripe for commentary, or it might be too sensitive to touch. You have to judge carefully. The isolation of the castle becomes more apparent with each passing season. You're cut off from the wider world, living in a bubble. The same faces, the same walls, the same routines. The only variation comes from visitors and the changing weather. You start to feel like you're trapped in a loop, living the same day over and over with minor variations. The monotony is suffocating, but there's no escape. This is your life, for better or worse. The rare trips outside the castle walls are a relief and a challenge. The village nearby is small and poor, its inhabitants eking out a living from the land. You visit occasionally, performing in the village square for a handful of coins or a meal. The villagers are wary of outsiders, but they appreciate the entertainment. Their lives are even harder than yours in some ways. Back-breaking labour from dawn to dusk, dirt poverty, even less security. It makes you grateful for your position, miserable as it is. At least you're not breaking your back in the fields. The countryside is beautiful when you take a moment to notice. Rolling hills, forests, streams, the natural world goes on regardless of human concerns. You sometimes walk along a path just to feel the sun on your face and the wind in your hair. These moments are rare and precious, brief respites from the suffocating atmosphere of the castle. You breathe deeply, filling your lungs with fresh air, trying to store the feeling for later when you're back in the smoky, smelly Great Hall. The changing light throughout the day marks the passage of time in the absence of clocks. You learn to read the sun, to know roughly what time it is by where the light falls. Morning light is thin and cold, slanting through the narrow windows. Midday light is strong and direct, though it doesn't penetrate far into the castle's interior. Evening light is golden and fading, a signal that another day is ending. Night is dark and complete, broken only by the flickering light of fires and candles. The darkness at night is profound in a way modern people never experience. There's no electric light, no ambient glow from street lamps or buildings. When the fires burn low and the candles gutter out, the darkness is absolute. You can't see your hand in front of your face. Moving around in this darkness is dangerous. You're likely to trip or walk into something. Most people stay put once night falls, huddling near whatever light source is available. The question of respect and dignity becomes increasingly important as the years wear on. You're a jester, which means you're expected to be ridiculous, to be the butt of jokes, to humiliate yourself for others' amusement. This is the job, and you accepted it. But maintaining some sense of self-worth while doing this work is a constant struggle. You're not just a fool, you're a person with thoughts and feelings, even if no one seems to care about that. The line between being laughed with and being laughed at is thin and easily crossed. Sometimes you're in control, deliberately playing the fool, and the laughter is part of the shared experience. Other times you're genuinely messing up, and the laughter is mocking. You can hear the difference, feel it in the air. The mocking laughter stings, even though you know you're supposed to have thick skin. You paste on a smile and continue, but inside, a little piece of your self-respect crumbles away. The cumulative effect of years of this treatment is hard to quantify. You've learned to compartmentalize, to separate the jester persona from your true self. But the boundary gets fuzzy. When you're in costume and performing, you're the jester. When you take off the costume, you're supposed to be yourself again. But increasingly, you're not sure who that is. The jester has become your identity, and you're not sure there's anything underneath anymore. The moments of genuine connection are rare but precious. Another servant sees you looking tired and offers a kind word. A guard shares his drink with you after a performance. A cook slips you an extra piece of bread. These small kindnesses are lifelines, reminders that you're human, that someone notices you beyond your role. You hold on to these moments, treasuring them during the dark times. The relationships you do manage to form are complicated by your position. Friendship with servants is possible, but always tinged with awareness of your different roles. Friendship with nobles is impossible. The power imbalance is too great. You're friendly with many people, but true friendship, the kind where you can be vulnerable and honest, is elusive. You have acquaintances, allies, people you get along with, but someone you could truly confide in, that's a luxury you don't have. The absence of romantic prospects is another source of quiet sadness. Your position makes you an unappealing partner. You have no money, no property, no security. You're completely dependent on the Lord's whim. What kind of life could you offer someone? And who would want to attach themselves to a jester? Someone who's seen as ridiculous and beneath consideration. You've long since given up on the idea of partnership or family. It's another sacrifice you've made, though you didn't consciously choose it. It just became clear over time that it wasn't an option. The physical changes in your body as you age are impossible to ignore. Your joints ache more. Your stamina isn't what it was. You can't bounce back from injuries as quickly. The face you see reflected in the occasional polished surface is older, more worn. Lines have appeared around your eyes and mouth. Your hair, what you can see of it, is going grey. You're aging faster than you should, the hard life taking its toll. You wonder how much longer you can keep this up. The fear of the future is a constant companion. What happens when you can't perform anymore? When your knees give out, or your back goes, or you simply don't have the energy? There's no retirement plan for jesters. You'll be cast out, left to fend for yourself. The thought keeps you up at night. You have a few coins saved, but not enough to live on for long. You have no family to take you in, no connections to call on. You'll be homeless and destitute, begging on the streets or dying in a ditch. The thought is terrifying, and you have no solution. So you keep going, day after day, pushing through the pain and exhaustion, because the alternative is worse. At least now you have a roof over your head and food in your belly, inadequate as it is. You're alive, and that counts for something. You take it one day at a time, not looking too far ahead, because the view is too bleak. You focus on the immediate. Get through this performance, make it to the next meal, survive until tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll worry about surviving the next day. The small rebellions you allow yourself are petty but satisfying. Cutting a joke just a little too close to the bone, watching the Lord's smile tighten, taking an extra piece of bread when no one's looking, sleeping in an extra few minutes before the roosters start. These tiny acts of defiance don't change anything, but they make you feel slightly less powerless. You're not completely broken, not yet. You still have some spark of independence, some core of self that refuses to be entirely crushed. The moments of beauty you encounter are unexpected and deeply felt. A shaft of sunlight illuminating dust motes in the great hall, a bit of song drifting from the chapel, the first flowers of spring pushing through the mud. These moments catch you off guard, stirring something inside that you thought had died. You pause, just for a second, and let yourself feel something other than exhaustion and anxiety. Then the moment passes, and you're back to the grind. The stories you hear from travelers and visitors give you glimpses of a wider world, tales of distant lands, exotic customs, strange foods and animals you've never seen. You listen hungrily, your imagination painting pictures of these far-off places. You know you'll never see them yourself. You'll never travel beyond this small corner of the world. But hearing about them, imagining them, is a form of escape. For a few minutes, you're not a jester in a cold castle. You're an explorer, an adventurer, someone living a life of excitement and discovery. The songs and stories are also your stock in trade, of course. You collect them, memorizing the good ones, adapting them for your performances. A clever tale heard from a traveling merchant becomes part of your routine. A bawdy song from a soldier gets cleaned up slightly and added to your repertoire. You're constantly gathering material, your mind always working even when your body is at rest. The pressure to maintain standards is self-imposed but no less real. You take pride in your craft, such as it is. You want to be good at what you do, to give quality performances. This isn't just about survival, though that's certainly part of it. It's about maintaining some sense of professionalism, some standard of excellence. You're a jester, but you're a competent jester. That matters to you, even if it matters to no one else. The craft of entertaining is more complex than it appears. Timing is everything, A joke delivered a second too early or too late loses its impact. Physical comedy requires precision. The difference between a laugh and a thud is often just a matter of inches. You've spent years honing these skills, learning through trial and error, building a repertoire of techniques. This knowledge is your only real asset, the only thing of value you possess. The teaching of these skills to someone else has crossed your mind. An apprentice who could learn the trade, carry it on. But apprentices are usually younger people sent by their families, and you're in no position to take one on. You have no authority, no resources, no legitimacy. Your knowledge will die with you, and there's something sad about that. Years of accumulated skill and experience gone when you go. But that's the nature of this profession. It's ephemeral, leaving nothing behind but memories that fade. The philosophical questions that creep in during quiet moments are uncomfortable. What's the point of any of this? You're entertaining people who barely see you as human, burning through your life for their momentary amusement. Is there meaning in that? Purpose? Or is it just survival, animal instinct keeping you going? You don't have answers. You're not educated enough, not philosophical enough, to grapple with these questions properly. You push them away, focus on the immediate, on the concrete tasks in front of you. The practical realities of staying alive in the castle require constant attention to detail. You've learned to navigate the unwritten rules, the subtle hierarchies, the shifting alliances. You know which servants can be trusted and which ones will stab you in the back for a slight advantage. You know which guards are friendly and which ones are looking for an excuse to hassle someone. You know when to speak up and when to keep your mouth shut. This knowledge has been hard-won, accumulated through mistakes and misunderstandings. The morning routine, such as it is, sets the tone for the day. You assess your physical state, what hurts, how badly, whether you can work through it. You check your costume for new damage that needs repair. You run through your mental list of what's expected today. Any special events, any visitors, any known triggers for the Lord's temper. This mental preparation is crucial. Going into the day blind is asking for trouble. The breakfast situation is always precarious. You're dependent on the kitchen staff's goodwill for anything beyond scraps. You've cultivated relationships there, but they're transactional. You entertain, they feed you. If you haven't been funny lately, your portions shrink. It's a direct, brutal feedback system. You can literally see your value reflected in the size of the bread chunk you're handed. The Great Hall in the morning has a different character than later in the day. It's quieter, less crowded. Servants are cleaning, preparing for the day's activities. You can move around without bells jingling and attracting attention. These brief moments of relative peace are when you do your thinking, planning your day, rehearsing new material, checking your props. Once the household fully wakes up, you'll be on, and there will be no time for preparation. The performances themselves have become almost automatic in some ways. Your body knows the routines, can execute them without conscious thought. This is good and bad. Good because it means you can perform even when exhausted or distracted. Bad because the lack of conscious engagement means you're just going through the motions. The spark is gone, replaced by mechanical competence. The audience doesn't notice, or if they do, they don't care. But you know, and it bothers you. The afternoon slump is real. You've been performing since morning. You haven't eaten enough, and your energy is flagging. This is when mistakes happen. You drop a juggling ball. You stumble during a tumble. Your timing is off. You push through, relying on experience and stubbornness, but it's hard. The Lord's attention has wandered anyway. He's deep in conversation with someone. and you're just background noise at this point. You keep going because stopping would be more noticeable than a mediocre performance. The politics among the servants intensify during the day as stress and fatigue set in. Someone snaps at someone else. An old grudge resurfaces. You stay out of it when possible, but sometimes you're drawn in. Your position makes you a useful neutral party sometimes. You're not part of the servant hierarchy, so you can mediate without seeming to take sides. Other times, your outsider status makes you a convenient scapegoat. Something goes wrong, and it's easy to blame the weird Jester. You've learned to defend yourself verbally, deflecting blame without making enemies. The mental exhaustion is as bad as the physical. You're constantly calculating, constantly performing emotional labor, reading people's moods and adjusting your behavior accordingly. It's draining in a way that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. At the end of the day, your brain feels wrung out, incapable of complex thought. You sit and stare at nothing, too tired to even sleep properly. The cycle of the week is marked by small variations. One day might be market day, with new faces and energy in the castle. Another might be the Lord's meeting with his advisors, which means everyone is tense. The rhythm helps structure your life, gives you markers to orient yourself. Without them, the days would blur into an indistinguishable mass of discomfort and performance. The weather's impact on daily life can't be overstated. A sunny day lifts everyone's mood, makes the castle slightly less miserable. A rainy day makes everything worse. People are irritable, the castle is gloomier, and you're expected to compensate with extra entertainment. You become a sort of emotional regulator for the household, expected to counterbalance whatever external factors are affecting the mood. It's an impossible task, but you try anyway. The accumulation of minor injuries becomes your normal state. You always have bruises in various stages of healing. Your fingers are perpetually sore from stitching repairs. Your feet hurt constantly. You've developed a tolerance for pain that would alarm a healer. When something doesn't hurt, you notice it because it's unusual. Pain is your baseline, and you've adjusted your expectations accordingly. The seasonal illnesses sweep through the castle with predictable regularity. Winter brings coughs and chills. Spring brings stomach troubles as the stored food starts to turn. Summer brings fevers. Autumn brings the anxiety of preparing for winter. You catch whatever's going around, suffer through it while still performing, and eventually recover. Your immune system is probably robust from all the exposure, but it doesn't feel that way when you're in the grip of a fever. The castle's rhythms are tied to the agricultural calendar in ways you're only dimly aware of. Harvest time means abundance and celebration. The lean months before harvest mean tighter rations and shorter tempers. You notice the effects, but don't fully understand the causes. You're too far removed from the actual work of farming, even though the castle's entire existence depends on it. The moments of genuine laughter in your performances are rare but rewarding. When you truly connect with an audience, when everyone is laughing together, there's a shared joy that transcends the usual boundaries. For those few moments, you're not a servant or a jester. You're an entertainer, a creator of happiness. These moments are what keep you going, what remind you why you're doing this. They're few and far between, but they're powerful enough to sustain you through the darker times. The development of your own sense of humor has been shaped by this work. You find things funny that others don't, see absurdity in situations that seem normal to everyone else. The castle's rigid hierarchies and petty dramas are ridiculous when you step back and look at them objectively. You can't express this perspective openly, but it informs your performances, adds layers that the more perceptive audience members might catch. The relationship with your props becomes almost sentimental. These worn, patched, barely functional objects are your tools, your partners in performance. The cracked juggling ball that pinches your finger has been with you for years. You know its weight, its balance, its quirks. Replacing it would mean adapting to something new, and you don't have the energy for that. So you keep repairing it, extending its life, because it's familiar and reliable. The costume has become a second skin. You've worn it for so many hours that you barely notice it anymore. The jingle of bells is the soundtrack to your life. So constant you'd probably feel strange without it. The bright colours that once seemed garish are now just how you look. When you catch a glimpse of yourself in a reflection, you don't see a person in a costume. You see a jester. The transformation is complete. The loss of your former identity, whoever you were before this, is something you try not to think about. There was a time when you were someone else, had different dreams and expectations. That person is gone, replaced by the jester. You're not sure if that person died or just evolved, but either way, they're not coming back. This is who you are now, and mourning what was won't change anything. The castle's inhabitants have their own problems and concerns, and you're just a small part of their world. The servants are worried about their own positions, their own struggles. The nobles are occupied with politics and power. You're a minor player in everyone else's drama, easily forgotten when you're not actively performing. This invisibility is both a blessing and a curse. It means you're left alone sometimes, but it also means you matter very little. The hierarchy of suffering is something you think about. Are you worse off than a field worker, breaking their back in the sun? Better off than a beggar starving in the streets? The comparison is meaningless, really. Suffering isn't a competition, but you find yourself making these comparisons anyway, trying to contextualize your situation, to figure out where you stand in the grand scheme of misery. The feast days are peaks in the otherwise flat landscape of your existence. These are the days when there's actually good food, when the atmosphere is celebratory, when people are generous and forgiving. You prepare for these days with extra care, knowing they're your chance to shine. A successful performance at a feast can buy you goodwill that lasts for weeks. A failure can erase months of accumulated credit. The stakes are high, and you feel the pressure acutely. The preparation for a major feast involves the entire household. Everyone has tasks, and the castle buzzes with activity. You're largely left to your own preparations, which is both freeing and isolating. No one checks on you or offers help. You're expected to manage yourself, to show up ready to perform. This independence is what you wanted, but it's also lonely. You prepare in solitude, running through routines, making repairs, psyching yourself up. The feast itself is overwhelming. The great hall is packed with people, loud with conversation and laughter. The smell of food is intoxicating, making your stomach growl fiercely. You perform in the midst of chaos, competing for attention with the spectacle of the feast itself. The food, the drink, the decorations, all of it is more interesting than you. You have to work twice as hard to get noticed, throwing yourself into the performance with abandon. The aftermath of a feast is a crash. The hall is a disaster. Rushes soaked with spilled drink, tables littered with food debris. Servants are already cleaning, their exhaustion evident. You're just as tired, but you're also wired from the performance, adrenaline still coursing through your system. You can't sleep yet, so you wander the castle, restless and unsettled. Eventually exhaustion wins, and you collapse wherever you happen to be. The hangovers you occasionally suffer are brutal. Sometimes the Lord or a guest insists you drink with them, and refusing is not an option. You down wine or strong beer, far more than you're used to, and the next day you pay for it. Your head pounds, your stomach churns, light hurts your eyes, and you still have to perform because the Lord doesn't care that you're suffering. You stumble through routines, fighting nausea, counting the minutes until you can lie down. The animals in the castle have it easier in some ways. They're fed regularly, given shelter, allowed to sleep when they're tired. They don't have to perform or worry about their status. They exist, and that's enough. You've envied them more than once, watching a cat sleep peacefully in a sunny spot, while you're exhausted but required to be alert. The cat doesn't have to be funny or useful. It just has to catch mice occasionally, and even that's not strictly required. The birds outside the castle represent a freedom you'll never have. You watch them fly, coming and going as they please, and you feel a pang of longing. You're trapped here, bound by circumstance and lack of options. The birds are free, and you're not. It's a childish thought, you know. Birds have their own struggles, their own dangers, but in the moment, watching them wheel in the sky, you wish you could trade places. The nights when you can't sleep are the worst. Your body is exhausted, but your mind won't shut off. You lie in the dark, listening to the snores and rustles of others, thinking about everything and nothing. Worries circle like vultures. What if you're not funny tomorrow? What if your knee gives out during a tumble? What if the Lord decides he's bored of you? The questions have no answers, but they won't leave you alone. You eventually drift into a fitful sleep, your dreams uneasy. The dreams themselves are often strange and stressful. You dream you're performing, and you've forgotten all your material. You dream you're falling and can't stop. You dream you're being chased by something you can't see. You wake up disoriented, not sure for a moment where you are. Then reality settles back over you like a heavy blanket, and you remember. You're still here, still a jester, still trapped in this life. The rare dreams that are pleasant are almost worse. You dream of comfort, of warmth, of kindness. You dream of a different life where you're valued and cared for. Waking from these dreams is heartbreaking. The contrast between the dream and reality is too sharp, too painful. You lie there in the dark, feeling the loss of something you never actually had, mourning a life that exists only in your imagination. The philosophical acceptance you've developed is a coping mechanism. You tell yourself this is just how life is, that everyone struggles, that you're no special case. You tell yourself to be grateful for what you have, to focus on the positive. These mental tricks help sometimes. They make the burden slightly more bearable, but they don't change the fundamental reality. You're still a jester in a medieval castle, and that's still a difficult, degrading existence. The moments of beauty you find are small but sustaining. The way light falls through a window, the sound of rain on stone, a particularly good piece of bread. These tiny pleasures are what make life bearable. You've learned to notice them, to hold on to them, to let them balance out some of the misery. It's not much, but it's something. The skills you've developed extend beyond performance. You've become expert at reading people, at navigating social situations, at surviving on very little. These are valuable skills, even if they're not formally recognized. You're more capable than you give yourself credit for, more resilient. You've survived years of this life, and that counts for something. You're still here, still functioning, still persisting. That's an achievement, even if no one acknowledges it. The future remains uncertain and frightening, but the present is manageable. one day at a time. You focus on that, on the immediate challenges, on getting through today. Tomorrow will bring its own problems, and you'll deal with them when they arrive. This day-by-day approach is the only way you stay sane. Looking too far ahead is paralyzing, so you don't. You keep your eyes on the ground in front of you and keep walking. The support system you have, such as it is, consists of a handful of people who tolerate you and occasionally help. It's not much, but it's something to hold on to. You're not completely alone, even if you often feel that way. There are people who know your name, who recognize you, who might miss you if you were gone. That's more than some people have, and you try to remember that. The perspective you've gained from this life is hard-won. You understand things about human nature, about suffering, about resilience, that more comfortable people never learn. This knowledge doesn't make you happy, but it makes you wise in a grim sort of way. You see through pretensions, recognize power dynamics, understand motivations. You're a keen observer because you've had to be. Your survival has depended on it. The final years of a jester's career, whenever they come, are marked by increasing difficulty and decreasing options. You're not there yet, but you can see it coming. The older performers you've met are cautionary tales. Their bodies are broken, their skills diminished, their positions precarious. They cling to their jobs because there's nothing else, performing through pain and exhaustion, because the alternative is destitution. You're heading down the same path, and you know it. The younger entertainers who occasionally appear represent a threat. They're fresh, energetic, innovative. They can do things you can't anymore. The Lord might decide he prefers someone new, someone different. You'd be out, replaced without ceremony. The fear of replacement is constant, lurking in the back of your mind. Every time you see a new performer, you wonder if they're your replacement, if your time is up. The strategies you've developed to extend your career are varied. You've learned to pace yourself, to not burn out completely. You've cultivated relationships that provide some security. You've diversified your skills, so you're not dependent on physical comedy alone. But these strategies can only do so much. Eventually, age and injury will catch up with you. It's not a question of if, but when. The castle itself is aging too in its way. Repairs are constantly needed. The stone crumbles, the wood rots. The building requires continuous maintenance to remain functional. You feel a kinship with the castle. You're both worn, both patched together, both persisting despite the decay. The castle will outlast you, of course. It will stand long after you're gone, housing other jesters, other servants, other lives. But in the moment, you're both just trying to hold together a little longer. The changes in the household over the years have been gradual but significant. People have come and gone. The Lord is older, more set in his ways. Some of the servants you knew when you started are gone, replaced by new faces. The castle is the same but different, familiar but strange. You're one of the constants now, one of the fixtures. You've been here long enough to be part of the furniture, taken for granted. The accumulated knowledge you have about the castle and its inhabitants is extensive. You know the secrets, the affairs, the grudges, the alliances. You know who's trustworthy and who's not. You know where the best hiding spots are, which servants are helpful, which guards are friendly. This knowledge is power, in a limited sense. You can't use it overtly, but it helps you navigate the complex social waters. It's one of your few advantages. The resignation you feel is deep and pervasive. You've given up on things ever being significantly better. This is your life, and it will continue to be your life until you can't do it anymore. Then it will end, probably badly. You've accepted this. The acceptance doesn't make it easier. but it stops you from wasting energy on false hope. You know where you stand, and you've made your peace with it as much as anyone can. The routine has become so ingrained that you could do it in your sleep. Wake up, dress, perform, eat scraps, perform, eat scraps, perform, sleep. Day after day, week after week, year after year. The routine is comforting in its predictability, but it's also numbing. You're not really living, just existing, going through the motions. Life has become a series of tasks to be completed, not experiences to be savoured. The rebellion you feel is muted but present. You haven't been completely broken. There's still a core of resistance, a small voice that says, this isn't right, that you deserve better. You can't act on this rebellion. The consequences would be too severe.